Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here. We are on day 3, StageX lunch, so let's get started. Our first conversation is pretty special. We are kicking it off with a dynamic duo. 2 university presidents, one from Stanford, one from Yale, who also happen to be none other than father and son. Jonathan Levin, president of Stanford, and Rick Levin, president emeritus of Yale. Moderating is Julia Stieglitz, CEO and co-founder of UpLimit, who was also an early leader at Coursera during Rick Levin's time as CEO. Please welcome Julia, Rick, and John to the stage.
Well, this is a truly rare treat to have 2 generations of extraordinary higher education leadership. And I'm excited to talk about some of the biggest topics, some of the things that are very much on people's minds during this sort of tumultuous time. And the first is around the job market and the labor market and new college grads. So AI is doing a lot of the work now that early college grads used to do. And we're hearing from employers that they are having AI do more and more of that work and potentially hiring less and less first and second year employees. And so my first question is, are the early rungs of the career ladder disappearing? And maybe starting with John.
Yeah, so thanks, Julia, for interviewing this, and great to see everyone. There's a lot of anxiety about jobs and early careers. We hear it from our students, and particularly from their parents. I think it's actually a little hard if you look at the labor market now to see the effects of AI showing up too much and disentangle that from other things that are going on, like interest rates are up, so tech firms maybe aren't hiring as dramatically. But it's certainly true that AI can do parts of people's jobs. And so if you think out over a number of years, that could have a significant impact, probably will have a significant impact on the labor market. And part of the way I think about it is the people who can use the tools, but also do the distinctly human things in their jobs, they will be great people to hire. And that's what universities have to focus on, is giving that combination of technical but also humanistic skills that will allow people to use technology but not be replaced by it.
Every technological revolution has big impacts on the labor market in the long run. That is, many jobs get destroyed, other jobs get modified, and certain jobs, brand new jobs, get created. If you just think about the internet, for example, or the advent of the computer, 40 years ago, people worried about would people do office work anymore? Because there was it was going to be so much more efficient. There'd be so many fewer administrative people working in white-collar jobs. Not true. Turned out people learned to master the tools. They enhanced productivity, and they transformed work to a certain degree. But also in augmenting productivity, created the possibility of more employment. And actually, we've seen that in every technological revolution. That the net effect is, while some job categories may diminish or disappear, net employment, overall employment, goes up because the economy is more prosperous and is investing in all kinds of things.
I'll build on that and give you an example. We have a faculty member at Stanford who's in the political science department. He's been one of the pioneers at using Claude Code to help him write papers. In fact, he's had Claude Code write entire papers. He does statistical analyses of elections and American politics, and he's gotten a lot of attention for this in the last couple of months. When he first recognized you could do that with the new iterations of the coding models, the Claude Code and Codex and so forth, his first thought was, I'm not going to need graduate students anymore. I'm just going to buy tokens, and I'll have a robot lab to do political science. And he worked on that he's had that idea for about a month. And then he changed his mind and said, I'm going to need twice as many graduate students because I have a lot of ideas for papers to write. And the graduate students will also be more productive. And that's basically sort of think about the way the private sector will also work. If you've only got a fixed amount of work and no new ideas, then you'll have less employment. And if people keep coming with new ideas and have better products and services, you'll have job expansion. And I'm an optimist on that front for the US economy.
So even if jobs aren't going away, it's a massive evolution, it's a massive transformation. And I'm curious about the advice that you're giving your grandchildren and your children in terms of when they go to college, what should they major in, what should they study, how should they approach their 4 years? 5 years ago, everyone was saying you should go to Stanford and major in computer science. and now people aren't so sure. I was listening to Dario, the CEO and co-founder of Anthropic, and he was talking about how there might be a revitalization of the humanities, which as a philosophy major, I was quite pleased about. But is that true?
What do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, every young person should be advised to get on top of AI, to be able to use the tools, because they will be productive tools in almost every occupation you can imagine. So it's not, but on the other hand, if I were giving advice to his children or his siblings' children, I would say what I always said to them and said to all Yale students: just follow your passion. Pick something that interests you, get deeply engaged in it, and that's the way you're going to grow as a person, it's by being really engaged in what you study. So I don't think if you go to particularly at universities like Stanford and Yale, where opportunities are going to be there when you graduate, even if you major in philosophy, I think I would not discourage students from studying that. On the other hand, I'm not sure there's going to be a huge shift necessarily toward the humanities, just because Dario thinks it would be nice. I think it would be nice too, but I'm not sure it's going to happen.
I think a lot also depends on how you're thinking about what you're trying to accomplish with an education. If your view of what you're doing with an education is you want to get a first job, then your major matters, because the certain skills will enable you to get in the door for certain first jobs. But that's certainly not how he thought about education, or I think about education. We're educating students to have many jobs over a long career and a productive and rewarding life. And so certain things that you study might be valuable, but not right away. I majored in English and math. And early in my career, the math major was incredibly valuable because I went into economics like your father and him, and it was very technical, and I used a lot of math. But then as my career went on, I used my English major much more, because being in a leadership role is much more about trying to understand where people are coming from and what is rewarding to them, and being able to communicate effectively and listen and be attuned to kind of the human experience. And a humanities major is incredible preparation for that. So, I think partly the time horizon for students is something that we don't, I think you can't stress too much to students in college how important it is that they're going to be working for decades, and we should be thinking about how do you lengthen that horizon. It's very easy to get your horizon compressed as a student, particularly with all the media and so forth. And you always want to stretch out people's horizons.
They're also going to be learning for decades. And that's where the importance of just developing critical thinking skills and the ability to, and the fearlessness to be able to take on any subject and as it arises comes in.
So I want to dive deeper into the value prop of higher education, the sort of evolving value prop of higher education in this AI era. So Rick, you were the CEO of Coursera, and it was during the time when people thought that MOOCs might disrupt higher education, where there might be only 10 institutions left, was a quote from one of the MOOC leaders. And that clearly didn't happen. But the same conversation is happening now, where AI might disrupt higher education. And I'm curious your thoughts on both why MOOCs didn't have that impact and if you think AI will.
Sure. I think in both cases, the actual effect on the structure of higher education will be smaller than predicted initially. In the case of MOOCs, yes, there were people with, very ambitious visions about the MOOCs sort of replacing the human teacher in the classroom and all of that. So we had, in the early years, faculty panic and a lot of institutional resistance to them. I went into Coursera after my time at Yale with an entirely different vision. Not that the MOOCs were going to replace standard higher education, but that the MOOCs were going to allow universities to reach far larger and greater audiences, and not just populations of students in the 18 to 22-year-old range, but people throughout their lifetime. And as it turned out, the biggest effects of MOOCs were on the labor market, not the educational institutions, because we created credentials that people aged 22 to 45 found incredibly valuable and helped them with their professional development. So I think I was not surprised that MOOCs didn't have that big an impact on higher ed. It did allow innovative faculty in various places to adopt ideas like flipped classroom, and they worked well, but it didn't have a revolutionary impact. And I think the same is going to be true of AI. AI is going to be it has incredible potential as a tool for pedagogy. I mean, I think we'll see incredibly creative work by faculty in designing ways to use AI in conveying material and in allowing students to master material. And I'm optimistic about it. I don't think it's going to change universities all that much. It'll just be another tool for improving things.
John, and what do you think? Are you worried about Stanford?
I'm not worried. I mean, I think you can already see the advent of AI and just sort of computation more broadly. It's going to have profound effects on the research side of research universities. It's going to change almost every discipline because of the ways that you can do modeling and inference and make hypotheses, and particularly if you can pair it in things like biology with a little bit more robotics in the labs, it's going to be absolutely profound, and it will be disruptive because unlike the prior 20th century waves of kind of scientific innovation, the major investor is not going to be the federal government. It's going to be industry. And so trying to figure out how universities can be at the frontier and attract the best scientists and do great basic research that creates public goods for the world, that's a huge challenge for this century. That's something we have to be on top of and proactive in figuring out how to do that. I'm actually, on the education side, I actually think there's sort of two challenges on the education side that everyone is wrestling with. One is, how do you not have AI be a crutch? That is, how do you make sure people can learn on their own 2 feet? And at Stanford, I think like many schools, that means more oral exams and seminars and things like that. Maybe the Oxford tutorial model will make a comeback. And then AI lets students do way more. You can do an enormous amount. You don't even have to know how to code, and you can build software tools and products. And we're 3 years into AI systems. So the opportunity to challenge students and ask them to do more and go deeper in lots of fields, technical, but even non-technical fields, social science where you can do research, I think that's exciting. I mean, we're trying to do that at Stanford through giving faculty seed grants to explore and innovate, and already you see people doing really, really creative assignments. At the Stanford Business School where you went, the students who don't know any computer science can build software products in a class. That's a pretty cool thing to have happen as a student.
One question I have with that is, so I have an 8-year-old, and she's gotten really into vibe coding, and she used Replit, and she's built a site to sell squishies online, so little fidgets. And she's 8, so she's going to be going to college in 10 years, and I can only imagine what she's going to do and what she's going to build and what she's going to be thinking about over the next 10 years. And what her decision point is going to be about whether to go to college and what college is going to provide her that's going to open up new economic opportunities. So I'm just curious, how you think about that. My 8-year-old in 10 years and the value prop that a higher education is going to provide.
First of all, I'm just feeling so inferior as a parent. So that's Kudos to you and your daughter. That's amazing. There's two things in what you said, actually, I think are so interesting. So one is this idea that like you're going to be able, these AI tools are going to be incredibly empowering for young people. You can just create amazing things. And certainly sort of some of the ways that the internet was, but hopefully in maybe a more productive and fulfilling way. So that I think is just exciting. You know, when the time comes to it, part of the way I think about it, particularly coming to a place that does liberal education like Stanford that's broadening, the question is really, what is the best way to use your time between the ages of 18 and 22? And to sort of prepare yourself for a long and productive adulthood and to be a citizen and to sort of, to come into adulthood. And my view on this is very few people are going to get to be 75 years old and look back and say, gosh, I wish I'd worked 4 extra years. That's just not really the way people are going to look back. They're going to think, boy, if you had an opportunity to go to one of the many great colleges or universities in the United States and open your mind in different ways and be challenged and learn how to think more rigorously and to meet people and to get exposed to different viewpoints and different visions of what your future could look like, why would you not do that if you had the opportunity and you could make it work economically and your family could make it work? It's a great way to spend the period from 18 to 22, and I think that will still be true many years out, even if the plushy business becomes a unicorn and sort of other opportunities open up.
You know, the years between 18 and 22 are very important developmentally for a young person. First of all, the brain is maturing, and it's at the time of one's development when you really do have the capacity for the first time, women are a little ahead of men on this, for abstract thought, for deep conceptual thinking. I mean, people that are 8 do not think deeply and conceptually. They may be brilliant and capable of building websites, but so it's a period where this kind of immersion into education really makes sense. And not to mention the social development, the formation. We used to talk about the formation of character. I mean, I hope we still talk about that, which is, it's a time when exposure to many people your age who are from many diverse backgrounds, who are different from you in all the possible ways you could imagine, who have different skills, different beliefs, come from different nations. That's so important, and our universities offer that opportunity to people to enrich their cognitive development and and also to mature socially in a really productive way. So, I'm with John. I think, universities aren't going away, even for prodigies.
So I want to hear a little bit about what you've learned from each other. So John, you watched your father navigate Yale during pretty tumultuous times, through a financial crisis, through the early internet era. And I'm curious if there was any moment or decision that you saw Rick make that really influenced you as a leader.
That's a great question. I mean, I think I could point to many things that, I'm biased, of course, but I think he was probably the greatest university president of the last 50 years. And there's many things I could point to that were specific accomplishments, like rebuilding Yale, forming a better partnership with New Haven, creating the Yale NUS campus that was really visionary and transformative for Asia, as well as for Yale, and many other things. But that's probably not how I would, when I think about lessons I took from watching him, it's probably not those specific accomplishments. It was more his leadership style, watching his leadership. He's a great listener. He's incredibly positive and optimistic. When you talk to you had about 15 people who worked for you who went on to be university presidents. That's what they all remember: calm, positive, optimistic leadership. And so I view that as sort of a great model for academic leadership.
Thank you.
And Rick, your son is the president.
I was your boss too. Do you agree with that?
Your son is the president of one of the most consequential universities during one of the most consequential technological shifts of our generation, maybe ever, and you're watching him navigate this. What are you learning from him?
Well, first thing I'm learned is his mother brought him up right. He brought up his siblings right, too. So I think what really impressed me about John's leadership is that in an era where so many university presidents seem, so focused on problems and so tangled up in the routine work of running these huge, now complex, multi-billion-dollar institutions, that John has remained crystal clear about what we're here for. What is the purpose of the university? What are its fundamental values? Why is seeking knowledge important? His message to students, which he gives at every incoming freshman class, and just recently wrote a letter to the admitted students, is, they're beautiful works because they talk about, they give the best possible advice, which is come here with an open mind and be curious. Like, take advantage of the resources of this place and just don't be afraid to ask any kind of question. And that, I think that's what universities are for. They're for people to explore and to learn, and for faculty to explore and to learn and to produce new knowledge. I think John just articulates all the things that are important about the university experience, both to faculty and to students. And besides, like me, he's calm and doesn't get flustered easily and gets the job done. So, very proud of that.
Okay, my last question. In 10 years from now, we're going to come back and have this panel again. And what are we going to talk about that you think will surprise people?
You got to take this one. I know what you're going to say, but go ahead.
The surprises will be that all the people in Silicon Valley had it wrong, and universities are just like they always have been. I mean, universities are the longest-lived institution in the Western world, apart from the Catholic Church. And while I say with all immodesty, Yale and Stanford will be here long after Google and Anthropic and OpenAI are gone. So we'll be there. We'll be there 100 years from now.
I love that prediction. I'll just add on that. I hope, look, it's been a very tumultuous time for college universities over the last several years, and particularly over the last year. And I hope that when we come back and do this in 10 years, that will be ancient history. That we'll have sort of moved on from the kind of fighting about the purpose of universities, and we'll have sort of remembered what important institutions they are and how much they contribute through their ideas and through the people that we educate. And we'll be focused on, what are the great opportunities for discovery in the future, and how can we broaden education and make it more accessible? The fundamental questions, how can we open people's minds? The fundamental questions that we're meant to be tackling, and that would be a good outcome for me in a decade.
Terrific. Well, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Julia, thank you. All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Rick, John, and Julia. Next up, we have 3 CEOs building what EdTech looks like in the next decade. We have with us the leaders of Age of Learning, Headway, and Guild. And our moderator for this conversation is Adam Nordin from Goldman Sachs. Please join me in welcoming Alex, Anton, Bijal, and Adam to the stage.
All right, we good to go? Excellent. Super excited about this panel today. We're going to get great perspectives from 3 different CEOs. CEOs that address young learners, adult learners, enterprise learners, individual learners, lots of great perspectives. I think everybody knows that I'm not going to spend time doing detailed introductions, but I'll give you just 2 seconds on each company here so we can level set on the perspectives that are going to be coming. Bijal Shah from Guild Education. Guild's a leader in innovating in workforce transformation, upskilling through employer-sponsored education. So they provide a multi-constituent platform, a marketplace. And that enables employers to partner with accredited institutions to provide and deliver accessible, outcomes-focused learning pathways at scale. And the scale part is really important. We're going to talk about that. Anton Kavlovsky, Headway, based in Kiev, founded just a few years ago, achieved amazing scale. Headway is a lifelong learning platform that focuses on bite-sized, actionable learning and content personalization. So it's a micro-learning approach, it has data-driven content delivery, and it helps adults acquire practical skills and knowledge quickly, but more importantly, expands access to continuous learning. Alex Galvani from Age of Learning. Age of Learning is a global leader in early childhood learning products. Many of you probably know, particularly if you're a mother with young children, their products, ABC Mouse, the academies, My Reading Academy, My Math Academy. What many people don't know as much is that Age of Learning is renowned for rigorous research-backed curricula, adaptive technology, and a user experience for very tiny people that is proven to boost literacy and foundational skills. So I want to kick off and just talk about the interrelationship between technology, learning, and the workforce. So throughout this week, there's been a lot of speculation about how modern technology is going to reshape the workforce, and it's estimated that more than half of that workforce needs to get reskilled in just a few years, by 2030. But none of us really know how that's going to present itself. So how do we prepare learners, young learners, adult learners, to be a part of the future workforce when we don't really know what those roles are going to be because technology is changing so fast? So, Bijal, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think I have two perspectives. One is that I think there are a set of jobs that exist today where will be durable for a longer period of time than 2030. And so I think asking ourselves questions about what are those jobs, where do they exist, and what do they look like? And the two places I'll go first is thinking about roles that require hands-on or applied concepts and human interaction. While technology will assist in helping to enable those types of jobs, I think they will persist longer than 2030. And so I do think we need to be realistic about which jobs are going to continue to be durable. And then there are a set of jobs, obviously, that will evolve quite rapidly because the technology is moving so quickly and the tools and the capabilities are evolving so fast that we just don't need as many people doing those jobs. And so one, I think you have to separate those into two buckets. And for the second bucket, I think asking questions around how are those jobs going, what is the role of humans in those jobs becomes really important. And understanding, for me, I spend a lot of time thinking about if technology is going to continue to advance at this pace and the workforce is going to need to rapidly transition, how do we make sure we're teaching people how to learn? It is probably one of the most important skills to maintain resiliency. And so I love the work that you all are doing because I think it's so critical to teaching people at a very early age that learning is really important and that learning is a continuous process and that learning will be required for your entire career because you will need to maintain adaptability.
Yeah, so I guess in many ways our job is a little easier. Like we don't have to try to forecast which jobs are going to be successful. We know that a good, strong foundation for academic success is important, which is what we provide. And also the other part of our mission, which is really important, is to provide children with a strong love of learning, right? And because we're in many times the first impact that a child has with educational content or with learning, making sure that they have a great experience, making sure that they really fall in love with learning is important and applicable to whatever jobs or whatever happens kind of with the economy or the way that education evolves.
Anton?
Well, we don't know what we don't know, and I believe that currently it is extremely important to acquire that thing, that like fleeting thing of AI skills. So we now never talk about like computer skill. Like, of course, sometimes we talk, but I mean, we won't find it on like CVs, right? Computer skills, internet skills. That's something that is long past gone, right? 20 years ago, we could find that, but now it's table stakes. So now we have this like 5 to 10 years, maybe more, who knows, depending on how the pace of change will be. But to actually acquire that AI skills, that will be then the table stakes. And I see our role is to maybe even create products that we know won't be in use in like 5 to 10 years, but they will serve an important role right now because of how much change we're going through. And the other thing is to, of course, like first rule of AI Club is to talk about AI Club. So that's how we figure things out. That's how we experiment by talking to each other, but by sharing our like cases, successes, also failures. So that's why I'm here to talk it through and then to find out what's the next big, like let's say, we call it iPhone of like AI, not necessarily hardware product, but also it can be like a software product, but extremely, extremely important and valuable for our customers will be.
So I want to dig a little deeper on it, on a point that I think all of you are hitting on, and it's a distinction. But I think when we talk about the intersection of technology and learning and what the future looks like, more often than not, we're talking about how people learn. And I think there's a more fundamental question, given the pace of change, which is, does it change what they need to learn? So, kind of traditional methodology is that, we all sort of, regardless of content, what we're really trying to do is to develop, critical thinking, problem solving, high order reasoning, those kinds of things. But it typically comes through STEM-based types of activities. And so what are the essential skills that are necessary to develop in a world where technology is superior to humans in mathematics, in composition, in logic?
So, I think to be able to interact with a technology like that, I think having the fundamentals is still helpful. Like, I think if you don't know how to add interacting with a robot that is AI-based, that is doing all the addition for you, may be difficult when you're trying to actually put together multiple different concepts and try to have the sense of, an architecture of understanding versus just, what's 3 times 200 or whatever it is. Right?
Yeah.
So we still believe that those fundamental skills are really important. I do think that critical skills, I think the ability to adapt is very important, right? We know that the world is changing quickly, so I think that's something that we think is also important. But even like basic concepts of computational science, I think continue to still be valuable, even if a lot of the software is starting to be written by AI instead of engineers.
Yeah, I totally agree. I get asked this question a lot, and especially for people who have young kids, I'm like, nothing beats like mastery of reading and math. Those two subjects are the foundation to so many other things that I think are really important in a world where AI might be doing a lot of computation on your behalf or writing on your behalf. The ability to discern whether something is good or not, or to develop your own sense of taste or your own taste is really important. And I think you need those two things to be able to do that. And so I totally agree. I think it's really important. I think how people might learn will change so that we have the ability to bring more people along if we do this well. But I'm not sure that at least those fundamentals on the what will change.
And what about as we just envision in the future? So there's a world where we're all working in some way in roles that will change. I can't tell you how, but they will involve more agentic technology. So if we think about hard skills versus things like creativity or curiosity or risk tolerance, like should we be focusing more there? And I kind of asked the question because it seems like for the last 2.5 to 3 decades, we've been providing input to the higher education system that people need to focus on hard skills and professions if they want to see a greater relationship to employability. And in the forthcoming world, it feels like there may be more opportunity sets for people who are studying humanities, for people who are thinking about how to apply creativity along with critical thinking in ways that require more imagination. So do you agree, and B, how do we sort of effect that shift?
I think it's really hard to predict. I mean, I think that's part of the challenge, right? Is that it's hard to predict where things are going to go. Like, I think a good example is like, X-rays. Like, it very clearly, like, AI can read X-rays, frankly, better than most humans. And so I think a lot of people didn't go into the X-ray profession, and now it turns out that there's a massive shortage of people who can read X-rays. And it turns out that if you can sort of decide whatever your salary is if you have that skill. So I think it's a little hard to predict. My recommendation would be, stick to what you love, right? And do something that you truly enjoy, because I think that somehow that will help you progress in a way that, even interacting with machines, but trying to predict, I think is quite hard, especially now, since we're sort of at the beginning still of this revolution.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't want to downplay AI, of course, but calculators, basically, they didn't change the need in math skills, right? So calculator helped, but it didn't necessarily changed so dramatic. So of course, maybe we'll see this dramatic change with AGI, with in 5 to 10 years, maybe more. And of course, it is interesting to think about. So I'm reading lots of science fiction, and that helps to think it through. Like Asimov Profession, it's incredibly short novella on not necessarily about AI, but about how people acquire knowledge in a new age where it could be basically downloaded in people's brains, which is a good metaphor for current AI, and it paints not a very bright picture, of course, but we don't know how it will develop, and for the moment, I believe that all the basic skills are extremely valuable, and AI can actually help us acquire them faster, more efficiently, in a more personalized manner. So, yeah, I think that both hard skills and soft skills, or some people call them power skills, will all remain relevant.
Yeah, I think you're both making an interesting point, which is a lot of times when new technology makes something hyper efficient, we assume that the end result is fewer necessary to do the same work, instead of maybe the same or more people doing an incredibly greater amount of work. And the radiology thing is a great example, because what technology-based radiology interpretation resulted in was many people having more access to a radiology.
That's right. I mean, you see it in software development too, right? Like the hypothesis here, the theory is that AI disrupts software development entirely. I think what's happening is that it reduces the cost of software development, which increases the demand for software, and so you end up needing more people actually developing software, at least today. I think we'll see what happens over the next 10, 20 years, but today you certainly need software developers. Like, we found that they're more productive, but we continue to need software developers.
And Anthropic has hundreds of positions in software development, right? So.
That's right.
That's right. That's right.
I was just going to say, I think one of the things that is starting to become really clear is that people who have multidisciplinary skills are becoming more valuable. The ability to connect dots across multiple different subjects, or if you work inside of an organization, to have the ability to connect the dots to rethink a system requires you to look at things from multiple different angles. And so when I think about the argument for humanities, it is less about the humanities and more about, are you learning something? Are you creating multidisciplinary skills for yourself? Are you mastering multiple different subjects? And is that leading to your ability to see things in a different way or in a higher order way so that you can think about things, how things can be redesigned or re-architected? And so I do think that is going to become increasingly important. And even if you use something like Claude Cowork today and you're orchestrating your task, being able to just create things that help you do the task you're already doing is not actually the power of Cowork. The power is being able to look across the set of things you're trying to do and say, how can I orchestrate this system in a different way so that I can get better output and I can get it faster? And it requires a different way of thinking than a skills or task, one specific task way of thinking about things. I think it starts with, what problem am I trying to solve? And then what is the best way to solve that problem? And so the thing I worry most about is that when we get myopically focused on someone having a specific skill or a specific capability in this world where a markdown file can take care of one part of what you're trying to do, what's gonna happen to people who are only focused on being able to do that one thing really well versus on being able to build a portfolio of capabilities that allow them to better connect dots?
So let's dig deeper on that, because we can all stipulate technology is moving fast. It's going to require a different set of skills and a different set of applied behavior in how we approach work and problem solving. How much of the responsibility will fall on employers to cultivate that behavior versus on individuals to cultivate that behavior? And how early should we be cultivating that behavior?
Way to thread all three of us into.
I did. Let's go. Let's start with Anton, with the individuals.
Well, let me start, but I can appreciate both perspectives because I am the employer as well, right? And, we think about it a lot, about how to foster this culture of experimentation. That's the word. So for us and for me, that's the word, experimentation. So we can't know what will work, so we have to foster this culture, and people should make mistakes, move fast and break things, I think is very relevant in this fast-paced environment. And for individuals, that our customers, I think that we have to meet people where they are. That was our approach from day one, and to make it fun and engaging. And now AI is in high demand, AI skills, like learning that skills, and we provide that type of products as well. So we develop new products, we change our existing products to have something about what might be of interest. But at the same time, life goes on, and we may be in some kind of bubble in a way, and people are interested in other things, in history, in philosophy, in literature, and AI can also help there with personalization, with tailoring the experience to what people need at the moment, and we see great results in optimizing with AI workflows, and also we should not just think about product, but also distribution, marketing. That's a very important part of learning, making it making it fun, so people basically don't feel like they're learning, but maybe they're playing, they experiment and then they figuring things out as they go. That's our approach, but others work as well, so they're complementary, I believe.
Yeah, Alex, it sounds like Anton's describing a lot of what you guys do.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, I appreciate it. But yeah, I mean, our mission is to provide every child with that foundation and do it in as personalized a way as possible. In fact, we didn't really talk about how we're leveraging AI in our work, but one of the things that we do is we have AI that helps choose the right path for each child to master key concepts. And we see that that's very effective both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And part of our responsibility is also to democratize that kind of personalized learning. And so we make our products available for free in libraries. We now have a free mode in ABC Mouse, which is available to every child. We have a huge YouTube presence with thousands of videos that are available for each child. And again, we focus on that foundation, but a lot of it is also creativity. It's also critical thinking. It's also, understanding how to be flexible in an ever-changing world, right?
One of the challenges I think we face is that all of us within the industry of education or human capital management or young learners, enterprise learners, is we tend to frame learning within the parameters that we experienced it. And what we're learning is that as we used to think in generations, now we just think in cohorts because technology moves so fast, but the preferences for how people want to consume content, learn, maintain engagement, have fun, are changing very rapidly. So how do you stay current with that? Alex, I know you did a rebuild on your platform recently to respond to those kinds of needs. Bijal, I think this is probably one of the most important questions because enterprise leaders that you're meeting with are going to look for engagement and sustained engagement that translates ultimately to outcomes and impact. But we have people who are designing learning experiences for others who may want something very different.
Yeah, I think we started off very much at Guild focused on, I think a lot of employers were very focused on how do I prove engagement. That has shifted pretty materially where they have critical roles they need to fill, they have either retention or attraction or some other business driver that they need to use what they're using Guild for to prove or show or to actually deliver value on. And so the conversation has very much evolved into engagement for the sake of engagement is not helpful for me. What is helpful for me is actually getting the people the skills they need in order to be able to help drive my business forward. And there are 5 different ways that can happen, but I need it to be one of those 5 ways. And so the conversation has very rapidly evolved into ROI is no longer about engagement. And I think the value, we have a marketplace model, and I think the beauty of that model is that we are not beholden to one style of learning or another. We actually can use the power of that marketplace to very quickly evolve. If there's a new provider out in the market tomorrow that is doing something game-changing and it's going to drive outcomes, that's great. In this model, you have the ability to bring that provider online, and then you have the ability to connect supply and demand really quickly. And so I think the other thing that is really important, at least in our context, is because employers' needs are evolving or they aren't quite sure what they need, the agility and the nimbleness of a marketplace has proven to be quite powerful.
Awesome. I think we're coming up on time here. I just want to close up with something for the audience, maybe perhaps many people in the audience, because what we're seeing as a function of the pace of change in technology is a much more rapid shift to entrepreneurship, interest in founding companies, people who are looking to create impact in new ways. For the founders and CEOs who are looking how to navigate the mind-blowing change that's occurring to be successful, one piece of advice of just how you would think about taking your business forward and ensuring that you're staying true to your mission.
Don't build something in search of a problem, find a problem, and build something that fixes that problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned it earlier, but I think not trying to necessarily predict the future or project what's going to be important, but really focus on what you love, because entrepreneurship is quite hard, and if you don't love what you're doing every day, you're going to hate your life. So focus on things you enjoy.
Yeah, I hinted at my answer already. So we often think about products, minimum viable product, like everything about the product, but distribution is also incredibly important and is easily overlooked. And just think it through from day one. It's an integral part of the success of the business.
Awesome. Very much appreciate your perspectives. You guys run amazing companies. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining. Awesome. All right. Up next, we're going to hear from Jeff Salingo on his new book, Dream School, Finding the College That's Right for You. Jeff is a best-selling author and special advisor to President Crow at ASU. And he will be joined by Doug Belkin, higher education reporter at the Wall Street Journal. And to make the case for rethinking what we think of as a dream school, Jeff Salingo and Doug Belkin.
All right. Good afternoon. Good to see everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be here with Jeff Salingo, who is sort of the dean of the higher education journalist community. So an honor for me. I appreciate you asking me to do this. So for the folks who haven't read your book, why don't you just sort of tell folks what's in it? Why did you decide to write it?
So I decided to write it because when we think of higher education, when we think of college, especially in the US, we all have like different definitions of it. And when we even think about 3,000 plus colleges in the US, people find it really confusing. And so even as a parent or as a student or as a counselor, which is really where this book is aimed, we think of like 3,000 plus colleges, and so what do? We go to the rankings. And when we go to the rankings, no matter what rankings you look at, the same 25, 30 colleges are all at the top. And what I really wanted to do with this book was to widen that lens, right? Widen the aperture on the lens of higher education and really think about like what makes a good college beyond the top 25, 30, 50 colleges that we talk about all the time. Because if all we do is continue to go back to the rankings, we're going to come back and look at the same colleges all the time.
Yeah. You argue that everybody over-indexes on that. Why? Why are they so important in the culture and in people's minds?
Well, it's really interesting, Doug. For this book, I did a survey of 3,000 plus parents, and I asked them, how important is prestige for your kid in going to college, however you define prestige? And they said, 18% said it was really important. And then we said, how important is it to your kid that they go to a prestigious college? 26% said it was really important to their kid. And then this is where it got interesting. We said, how important is it to people in your community? People, your neighbors, people in your school? 62% said it was important to the people in their community. And we see that right now, right? Like I'm in a community, I see this in schools that I visit all the time. There's these Instagram pages where seniors announce where they're going to college, and everyone's looking at them, and right, and they're like, oh, this many kids are going to the Ivies, this many kids are going to the flagship universities, and it doesn't allow a conversation about why you're going to college and what you want to get out of that process.
So it benefits those handful of schools, it's good for them. Are they driving this prestige arms race, or is it coming from another place?
I think it's coming from all around us. I think right now, and I think particularly it's focused on the job market, right? Like everybody thinks that you have to go to the most selective school in order to get a job. And I think there's a lot of worry now, particularly with AI, potentially closing down pathways to jobs. And people think, well, I'm just going to get an insurance policy, and that insurance policy is getting a degree at a highly selective college. And the data shows, we have a lot of data in the book from research that we did, from research that Raj Chetty and Opportunity Insights did at Harvard, that shows that there's actually a broader range of people working at all different kind of companies. And by the way, even if you just look at the Fortune 500 CEOs, there are 300 undergraduate institutions represented among the Fortune 500 CEOs.
Tell folks about the lottery ticket story. I thought it was so instructive too.
Yeah, so this comes from David Deming. So David Deming is one of the economists that works on Opportunity Insights with with Raj Chetty. And I actually went to see David because when you look at the pedigree of all the economists that work on Raj Chetty's team, David kind of fascinated me because he went to Ohio State as undergrad, and everybody else on the team went to an Ivy, essentially. And so David now works at Harvard, so I went up to see him. And as he explained, if you go to an Ivy Plus school, you're going to get an extra lottery ticket in the game of life. But it doesn't guarantee a win. And in fact, what we end up doing is we end up over-indexing it because we end up thinking about the outliers who go to Ivy Plus schools. And there's no doubt about it. They give you a leg up, especially in certain industries. But what we end up looking at is the top of the class and where they end up. And when you look at it on average, students who go to Ivy Plus schools, their outcomes are remarkably similar to big publics, whether it's ASU, whether it's one of the UCs, whether it's University of Florida, University of North Carolina, Michigan, Iowa. It's remarkably similar at the average. And so we end up telling ourselves these stories that the best graduates at the Ivy League and the Ivy Plus institutions are similar to everybody else.
So if you're trying to unwind that, because it is not intuitive because of the water we swim in, how would you wrote a book about it, but tell me what the advice you would give to university leaders in terms of trying to make that case?
I think it's really hard to kind of push back this stream. I think we need to start talking, and we have in the last couple of years started talking a lot more about outcomes and data. When I present data to parents, they start to see that. But we also have to talk about what the undergraduate, and I'm really focused on undergraduates here, what the undergraduate experience is really like at a broader range of schools. So I would talk to students who went to smaller liberal arts colleges or big public universities that are not in the top 50 or top 25, and they would talk about the undergraduate research experiences that they had. So, in the beginning of the book, for example, I talked to the student William, who wanted to go to the most selective college he could get into, which ended up being Columbia University. He shows up on Columbia's campus. He wanted to do undergraduate research because he grew up near the University of Minnesota and he did research in high school. And he couldn't, he wanted to go research with this particular professor, and the professor said, yeah, I only work with graduate students. And then he wanted to take this particular class, and his advisor said, yeah, the waiting list for that class is so long, you're not going to get in until junior year. He talked about the competition to get into clubs was harder than the competition to get into Columbia. And by the time he came home at winter break, he told his mom, I want to transfer. And by the end of his freshman year, he did, to the University of Minnesota, where he kind of found a broader range of experiences. And that's the thing we don't talk about. We just look at and I said to him, I said, William, all these things you had discovered about Columbia once you arrived, you could have actually discovered during the college search. And he said, yes, but I was blinded by prestige. And so I think to push back on that from college and university leaders, we have to start telling the stories about what is happening at with the undergraduate experience. And Doug, you have taken a lot of tours as have I. I have a 16-year-old at home right now. And so we're starting to do a lot of college tours. And I'm amazed at just the plain vanilla way we talk about colleges. Instead of saying, here's what's really going to happen in those first couple of weeks of your freshman year, in the first couple of months, like giving me more examples about somebody like William might actually succeed on a less selective campus because it actually offers what he wants. But most colleges tend to think they're aspirational, right? They want to be more like these bigger public universities or the Ivy Plus, and so they end up talking about what they value instead of what the students value.
No, that's a wonderful point. So for folks, and I'm sure there's plenty of them who have teenagers at home who are beginning this process now, your advice would be pragmatism. What else would you tell them?
Well, I think you really want to look for hands-on learning experiences, right? You see that so much here at ASU+GSV, right? The need for experiential learning, right? So we know from the data from the Burning Glass Institute that you're half as likely to be underemployed if you have hands-on learning experiences in college. Now, some colleges will build that into the experience, right? Georgia Tech and Northeastern and Drexel and University of Cincinnati, right? They have co-ops, but those are very few and far between. A lot of other colleges will kind of say, you're kind of on your own, or they'll build it into the curriculum, but they won't really help you get it. And so I think it's really critical to look for those hands-on learning experiences that are really integrated into the curriculum. And then finally, you really want to look for that ROI. I'm really amazed at these parents and families, and this is a real big sea change that we saw in the reporting for the book, that parents are starting to think differently about paying for prestige. It used to be, even as recently as 10 years ago, there was a wide selection of colleges that parents would say, if you could get in there, I'm gonna pay for it. That group of colleges is getting small, and we see it in the data, getting smaller and smaller. So I just spoke to a board of a college that 10 years ago, 60% of their students were full pay. Today, it's 20%. Right? Because parents are unwilling to pay full price for what they perceive as not as prestigious anymore. And they're willing to take a chance on a wider range of institutions as a result.
Yeah. So you've been covering this sector for a long time. You did a lot of research for this book. What surprised you?
Well, one of the things that surprised me is what I just said, right? This idea that we're starting to see a sea change, I think, in generations. You have moved on from baby boomers, who were often the first in their family to go to college and really felt transformed by the experience, who for their own kids were willing to do anything to get them the college experience that they wanted at any price. Now you have Gen Xers, early millennials, who often now are the second in their family sometimes to do this. And they are a generation that has multiple kids. They are thinking about their own retirement. They're thinking about aging parents. And they're also thinking about, I want to pay for college, but I'm not going to pay anything for college. And so I think there is this affordability moment right now in higher ed where there is a generation of paying parents who are unwilling to pay anything for college.
Yeah.
And that really surprised me in this book.
And you think that's a positive or a negative? How would you frame it?
I think it's a positive because what I think is we have an affordability crisis. And I know that college leaders, when I say that, college is more accessible and less expensive. Yes, at the very top institutions, it is because they put a lot of money into financial aid. But for most Americans, especially middle-class Americans, it's really hard to pay for college. And I think that if we start to see more and more consumers say, we're not going to pay that, what it's going to do is force decisions at colleges to start to cut costs or to start to think differently about how they deliver. Like, I'm really excited, for example, about the 90-credit 3-year degree, which really could cut the cost of higher education for a lot of students.
So there was news recently, Hampshire College announced its closing.
Yep.
What are the schools need to do to survive, these schools on the bubble, so that 10 years from now they're still around?
I think it's going to be really hard. I'm not one of these people who's going to announce here today that there's going to be 600 plus colleges closing in the next couple of years. But I just did this piece for The Atlantic this past week. And one of the things we tend to forget is that most students go to college within 50 miles of home.
Yeah.
Right? We tend to think like people go away to college, but most students go 50 miles of home. And because of the migration of the US, there is just a higher concentration of colleges and universities in the Northeast and the Midwest. And so if their market is mostly local, and you're now starting to, and many of those colleges are small, and you're starting to see a consumer interest in bigger institutions, not public and private. Some of it has to do with climate in the South. Some of it has to do with a wide array of programs. Some of it has to do with school spirit, whatever it might be. And so you have these small colleges, mostly drawing from local students, and you're seeing a demographic cliff, especially in those areas, in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. And it's just, the law of numbers that many of these are not going to survive. But what's interesting, Doug, is that after that news came out about Hampshire, I had a president text me from not far away from there and said, we just need a couple more to go out and we'll be okay, right? There's a survival of the fittest here where they think we don't have to change, we just have to outlast everyone else. And I'm not quite sure that is definitely a recipe for survival.
And from the conversations you had with the young folks who are going and concerned about, they don't want to pay for prestige, they're worried about the value of a degree, do you see the notion of a 4-year degree continuing to atrophy, or do you believe that they'll be around for a long time?
I still am a big believer in the power of the degree, because I think, first of all, especially among traditional age students, 18 to 22, again, I have a 16-year-old, she's not really ready. She does need a little bit more seasoning. And college has always provided that seasoning. Now, does it necessarily have to be 4 years on a residential campus where everybody lives together? Not necessarily. I think there is many more options now. You know, at ASU, a lot of students are doing hybrid. I was with Eloy Oakley, who used to head up the California Community Colleges last night. He mentioned his own daughter is taking online classes as a residential student at a University of California campus. So I think we can see students having many more pathways than they have now. Because I think what ends up happening now, and I think parents are really frustrated about this, is it's like walking into a store and they have like 4 products and you have to just pick from one of those. Well, we want more choice. And right now, at most colleges and universities, you have 1 or 2 pathways you can pick. And we want more flexibility, especially I was talking earlier about experiential learning. Well, if I'm going to school, and this is another issue with some of these small colleges in far-off places, they don't have a lot of opportunity around them to get experiential learning in real time. So if I'm a student at one of those colleges, say I want to do an internship in the middle of a semester, well, what are my choices then to take classes? Can I take online classes and still get credit to get my degree? And so students just want a lot more flexibility that most colleges and universities still, and I still don't understand why, are unwilling to give them.
Well, if you haven't read it, it's a wonderful book. I recommend it to everybody, especially if you have kids in high school now.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time today.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, for our next conversation, we have a truly powerful panel of leaders here to discuss the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and what it takes to lead with moral courage today. We're joined by Jonathan Eig, Pulitzer Prize-winning author of King, A Life, Dr. Michael Sorrell, the longest-serving president of Paul Quinn College, Dr. Michael Lomax, president and CEO of UNCF, and the 2025 ASU+GSV Lifetime Achievement Award winner, Dr. John Sylvanus Wilson, executive director of the McGraw Center for Educational Leadership and former president of Morehouse College. And our moderator for this conversation is Maurice Dubois. He's the former co-anchor of the CBS Evening News. So please join me in welcoming these leaders to the stage.
Thank you so much. We're going to jump right into it here. We only have some limited time, and we have people who are very loquacious, shall we say. So our starting point, when it comes to leadership and moral courage and the lessons we can learn from his life story, Martin Luther King was far more complex than the way he's mostly portrayed today. You know, more of a myth than a man is what we've all agreed is the case. So Dr. Lomax, I'm going to start with you. You are the only one up here who actually met Dr. King. Mm-hmm. You met him when you were a little boy.
Yes.
What was that like? What has stayed with you to this day?
Well, I met him because my mom, who was a journalist in Los Angeles, actually went to Montgomery in '56 to cover the bus boycott. And she met the King family, and the next year when he came out to Los Angeles, he came over to the house for an interview. And so we went over and picked him up from the Hotel Watkins on Adams Boulevard and brought a very young Martin Luther King to our home. There are 6 of us. We were bratty kids, and he was like good minister, good with kids. So one element was he was good with kids, and watched my mother interview him. Didn't encounter him again in person, but certainly encountered him through media until 1964 when I started Morehouse College. And he was a regular on the campus, would come and get students and get us to participate in demonstrations. So I demonstrated around the state capitol when they refused to seat Julian Bond because of his opposition to the war. And the last experience I had with him was shortly before graduation in 1968, when he'd been assassinated. His body lay in state on the Spelman campus, and the funeral was on the Morehouse campus. And so I was one of the students who worked And one of the jobs I had was to take people, distinguished people who came to pay their final respects over to Sisters Chapel, and I took Ruby Dee and her husband, Ossie Davis, who were very close to him, to visit. So I saw him up close and personal. The one thing that always strikes me is how young he was at the beginning.
Right.
And then seeing him in that casket and knowing that this man whom I had met a decade earlier had given his life so that I could have a better life.
Hard not to stay with you for life. Speaking of how young he was 26 in 1955 when he got his PhD in theology from Boston University. 26. That December, that was June, that December he's elected president of the Montgomery Improvement Association, the leader of the bus boycott. Dr. Wilson, did he find the movement or did the movement find him?
I think a little both. He had quite an evolution. I know that he came to, I'm a graduate of Morehouse. Not only did I preside, but I'm a graduate of Morehouse as well. So he left a lot of smoke in the air at Morehouse. I know that he came to Morehouse reading at an 8th grade level because that's what the Atlanta public schools were designed to do. But he was also ready, and he also came to Morehouse intending to be a doctor or businessman. Morehouse, particularly Benjamin Elijah Mays, converted him. So I think his trajectory toward the movement started at Morehouse and the influence that Benjamin Elijah Mays had on him. And what I always say is that, you know, he got something that today's college graduates need. He came out of Morehouse. He's kind of symbolic of other graduates of HBCUs in that he came out with a dual competency. Not only did he have a skill set, the way I put it, a skill set for a better me, meaning he was employable and able to make his way through the world, but he also had a mindset for a better we. And that mindset for a better we, thinking beyond yourself, is what HBCUs got right in the middle of the last century, and that's why they very deliberately and aggressively shaped the generals and foot soldiers for a civil rights movement that would advance American democracy. There are two scholars at Harvard who say that democracy was not really born. We're about to celebrate our anniversary, but democracy was not really born until 1965 with the Voting Rights Act, and that's what gave a critical mass of Americans a chance to vote. That only happened because of HBCUs, and Dr. King is the quintessential HBCU.
Let me ask it this way. Was it Coretta's idea? Okay? Because Bernice, their daughter, said her mom would often say, "This family is called." Did she nudge him into this? Do you want to take that, or anybody else want to take that?
I have a perspective on it, but I think she certainly had an influence. I'm married. I know wives have a profound...
Same here.
She was not uninvolved. But I'm serious about the mindset that Morehouse gave him and converted him into someone who had a North Star, and that's what he had.
Jonathan, you show us how Dr. King questioned whether he was the right person for the movement, that he led not from certainty, but despite doubt. How did he think that through? And was he ever ultimately sure? And was Coretta a part of this equation here, or how was she?
Well, Coretta was a big part. You know, when they met on their first date, and he was bragging about how he wanted to fight Jim Crow, it was Coretta who said, "How are you going to do it? What books are you reading? What's your plan?" And I think that's what attracted him to her more than anything, perhaps.
What's your plan?
She was smart. She had more experience as an activist than he did at that point. She'd been involved in protests at Antioch. She'd been involved in the Progressive Party National Convention. So I think she was always not just by his side, certainly not behind him, but out front in many cases. And when the Montgomery bus boycott began, he certainly had doubt. The first phone call came after Rosa Parks' arrest and asked him if he would come to a meeting, and he said, I'm not so sure that I have time. You know, and this is not the bold leader that we think of it. He had to think about it. He had doubts. He's got a 2-week-old baby at home. He's working on his doctoral dissertation. Why me? And then they asked him to speak at the first public meeting, the second day of the first night after the first day that they'd stayed off the buses. The Montgomery bus boycott was 1 day old. How long can we stay off the buses? They asked King to be the speaker. He's got 20 minutes to prepare and to decide what he's going to say, and that's really, it's happening in real time. And that's what history is all about. You know, we look at it and say, oh, well, Dr. King was made for this moment. Maybe he was, but he also could have passed. And Ralph Abernathy might have been the guy. But King was prepared for it, prepared by Morehouse, prepared by his study of the Bible, prepared by everything that had been baked into him from his ancestors for that moment. And then he answered the call, which he didn't have to.
By the way, he had a 2.5 at Morehouse. That's true, right?
It was a tough school back then.
Yeah, man, that's what I'm saying. And now look at him. There's hope for all C students out here. How, though, did he think that through? How did he overcome the doubt or manage the doubt?
Well, the doubt was with him constantly. Even after the bus boycott was a success and people began coming to him and saying, let's duplicate it, let's take it nationally. He writes to one of his college professors, what do I do now? They're expecting miracles from me. He's 27 years old, and he's making it up as he goes along.
Right.
And what happened, you know, I often remind people, what's the next big success in King's life after Montgomery? You can't think of one until Birmingham, which is 63. The student lunch counter protests, the freedom rides, this is not King. King's efforts are mostly failing for a long time, so he's learning from his failures too.
Right. Guys, I want to look at the mid-1960s, 1963, I Have a Dream speech. It was actually polarizing at the time. J. Edgar Hoover called him the most dangerous Negro in America. 1965, he's still projecting optimism. Montgomery, the march in 1965, March 25th, literally that date, he said, I know you're asking today, how long will it take, this famous speech? However difficult the moment, however frustrating the hour, it will not be long because truth across the earth will rise again. How long? Not long, because no lie can live forever. How long? Not long, because you shall reap what you sow. Summer of 66, he starts showing impatience and frustration in Chicago. I'm tired of marching for something that should have been mine at birth. Tired of living every day under the threat of death. I have no martyr complex. I want to live as long as anybody in this building, and sometimes I begin to doubt whether I'm going to make it through. I must confess, I'm tired. Mid-1960s, Dr. Sorrell, white backlash, death threats, worried about his family, black power as well. He's worried about that. What kind of pressure did he feel from all that was going on? What compelled him to keep on keeping on?
Well, let me say this. I think, just judging by some of the comments that were made here, a thread that I see is the importance of being called, right? Dr. King stands for this idea to me, and as a college president, how I like to encourage my students is every rose doesn't bloom on the first day of spring. The idea that he started college and read at an 8th grade level, and by the time we got to the March on Washington, spoke so eloquently that those words will ring forever. That is not an 8th grade education. That is not a 2.5 GPA. That is brilliance that has found its place.
Right.
And so whether brilliance is feted in that moment or it won't always be served in that moment. There was no way for white society to embrace him thoroughly all the way through. The issues that he was talking about at the point you got to the poor people's movement and things like that required people to give up something other than voting, right? It required a redistribution of wealth. It required the idea that we were going to build bridges across communities and disrupt the established status quo and power structures. Those are terrifying concepts. And so whenever you're talking about things that move from a platitudes to an actual change, you are going to lose those individuals who just want to be comfortable. I don't think there was anything there that was surprising, I think it was predictable. And I think the way he handled it and his frustrations show the evolution of a man who understood just how difficult the path was going to be.
What about 1967, Riverside Church in New York City? The speech where he speaks out against the Vietnam War, where he says, millions spend every day to hold troops in Vietnam, and our country cannot protect the rights of Negroes in Selma. He became isolated as a result of that, right? Seen as radical, unpopular. Most Americans disapproved of him, bringing together civil rights and an anti-war sentiment.
Yeah, but there wasn't just, so first of all, I remember that. I was a student at Morehouse, and opposition to the war in Vietnam was not a universal and universally embraced. And in fact, many of the critics said, you're distracting attention away from our cause. The other thing is the Poor People's March. That was not universally embraced.
Was not.
Stay in your lane, Martin. I don't know. One thing I will say about the Morehouse experience, and John, you'll appreciate this. You had every day you were being told, this is who you must become. You must become a leader. You must become a servant. This is who we expect. This is what we expect of you. So, he got that from age 14, and he was reading at 8th grade level. But remember, he started Morehouse at 14 years old. Right. And 2.5, pretty good for a 14-year-old. But I think that when you read his words, you understand that there's some point at which all of these conflicting theologies and ideas come together magnificently in his own particular interpretation of them. And so I think he struggled. He must have struggled for a very long time to reach a point where he had found purpose and the ability to articulate it with such magnificence and to activate others. And at the end of his life, and I would say he was not at his most popular when he died.
Not at all.
And he might have died not sure whether he had achieved what he was aspiring to achieve. And it was only, frankly, in his martyrdom that he was reinterpreted and re-embraced, not just by his own community, but by the world.
But Michael, it's not, you're right about the environment at Morehouse. But on top of the environment at Morehouse, giving you this mandate, he had the advantage of Dr. Mays just making sure he was awakened. By the time I become president of Morehouse, I really invested in that. I had ingested it when I was a student. And I made good use of a quote by Mark Twain. Mark Twain said, I told these young men at Morehouse what Twain said, the two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. I wanted Morehouse to be the #1 second-day institution in the world. I had my second day at Morehouse. My classmate, whom you all know, Spike Lee, came to me after sophomore year. He was there to start his junior year, and he said, John, I know what I want to do. I said, what? He said, make film. And from that point on, he was focused. He did a film by the time he finished Morehouse was a second-day institution for him. Jay Johnson lived next door to me freshman year. Morehouse was a second-day institution for him and so many other people. I believe Morehouse was Martin Luther King Jr.'s second-day institution. He had reluctance, he had struggle and everything, but I think he knew what he had to do. He went there, so we're blessed for it.
Yeah. Jonathan, talk about his state of mind, beginning, middle, and end. In the beginning, he was filled with all this doubt. At the end, he was pretty upset. He was pretty angry, pretty disillusioned. Talk about how he reconciled the fact that he's the leader under those circumstances, at those different points in his life.
I think it's really important to acknowledge that because everything you're saying is true, that he found his message, he found his belief, he knew what he stood for. And yet, he was still plagued with doubt. Coretta said that doubt was one of the main themes of his life. This insecurity, am I really up to this job? And yet, knowing what he was called upon to do. And, as you pointed out, his popularity plummeted. In the 60s, 2/3 of all Americans were opposed to Martin Luther King. They weren't just opposed to his stance on Vietnam, they were opposed to him. And yet he carried on and became more bold in his willingness to stand up for unpopular policies, including, opposing the war in Vietnam. That speech that he gave that you referenced, the Riverside Church speech, exactly a year before his assassination, was universally panned by the media. Even one of his best friends called him the next day and said that speech was terrible, it's going to cost us politically. And we know exactly what King said because the FBI was recording his calls. Let's not forget that in spite of all of his other struggles, he's got his own government trying to undermine his work, literally urging him to commit suicide at one point, and spreading rumors about his personal life to the media. All of this stacked against him. And he gets this phone call from his friend complaining about this speech, which I think is perhaps his greatest speech. And he says to his friend, well, that speech may have been politically unwise, but I believe it was morally wise. And at this point in his life that he still has to explain himself to one of his best friends, it's heartbreaking.
How did he keep going forward? Why? What was it inside him that told him, keep going?
I think you've heard it from my esteemed colleagues. It was his faith in God and his belief in the message of people like Dr. Mays, who said that you're here for a bigger reason. It's not about you. It's not about me, it's about we. And he believed that in his core, and he was willing to sacrifice for it.
Dr. Lomax, what about the arc of the way he was perceived? 1955 to 1968. Literally a 13-year run led to this figure who we uphold today, the holiday, and the way we look at him. What about the way he was perceived by the media, by American society in general?
Well, I think that in some ways, the conflict and the challenges were what molded him. I think he would probably view the Martin Luther King that we celebrate as a kind of shallow figure of who he actually was. He was a man he was a deep thinker who managed conflict and still inspired others to take action. I don't know, it's a hard question you're asking, and all I can tell you is that, well, I'll tell you two things. One is, after he made that speech in 1963 at the March on Washington, I know what my mother said. She said, we're going back to Alabama. So it was a call to action, unfortunately. I mean, we had to go back. But it was something, and that was Mississippi summer, we went back. Think of the way he was still speaking powerfully to many. And I lost to answer the question. What I will also say is that after he died, I think the black community was as confused about where our leadership would come from and what we would do. Yeah. And it wasn't really until, I don't know that it was for another decade that we found a new voice and a new sense of direction and purpose that was as powerful as the one we had when he was our leader.
I want to get into that in just a second, but the way he's perceived today, Dr. Sorrell, I have a dream. The bullet killed the dreamer, but not the dream. I have a dream. That it's repeated over and over. It's a day of service nowadays, his holiday. What about that? What would he say about that?
You know, I think it's interesting. Something that Dr. Lomax was just saying struck me as interesting, that I don't know if we have found a voice since his assassination. And I think that in an attempt to construct an image that we as a society can be comfortable with, we have sanitized who he is.
Yeah.
Because quite frankly, you wouldn't have a holiday if you had someone who it was being broadcast broadly that was against the Vietnam War, that he was speaking out against poverty, taking positions that were incredibly uncomfortable to people. So to me, and to what I listen to our students on the campus when they talk about it, right? They are hungry for a deeper understanding of who he is, right? Because it speaks to a deeper understanding of who they can be. And we won't ever be able as a society, I think, to truly consume the complexities of the man, because our attention spans just aren't that long, okay? But who he is and who he has been is a gift if we just will embrace all of it. But we don't. And I don't know if we ever will.
Many people to this day are waiting for the next leader, the next person to fill a perceived vacuum by his death. Are we thinking about this the right way, Dr. Wilson? Or is it something else that will move the cause of social justice forward?
I believe it was Barack Obama said, "We're the ones we've been waiting for," right? I think that's the ethic. That's certainly ethic in the Morehouse space. I want to speak to this dichotomy, though. You have on the one hand the poolside king. I have a dream by the reflecting pool in Washington.
Right, make sure people understand that. You're not talking about
the poolside,
not the swimming pool.
not the hotel pool.
By
Right,
the reflecting pool in Washington.
He was not chilling.
That's what I said. The poolside dream king, and then the riverside warrior king. I think both are relevant now, and we have to do a kind of a fusion. We do need the vision of the we. He articulated that in his dream. But the riverside king explicitly named three evils: racism, militarism, and capitalism. On capitalism, we have an aristocracy out of control today. Aristocracy in tension with democracy. On racism, trying to shut down the museum in Washington, trying to edit all the history books, etc. And on militarism, we know what's going on now in the world with a war. That king, the Riverside king, is as relevant today, if not more relevant, than the poolside king. And I encourage us all to get to know them both and pursue the ideals of both kings. There's only one Martin Luther King Jr. And we need to understand him in full. And I thank you for the book you wrote to help us do that.
Appreciate that. But, I wanted to add, when I interviewed Harry Belafonte for this book, he said he felt like the national holiday was designed to eliminate the radical king, that we don't celebrate radicals in this country, so we had to create a holiday that would sap him of his real strength. Sanitize him, whitewash him, candy coat him. And I think that our job, and certainly our HBCUs are doing a good job of this, is to restore the radical king to the throne. His radicalism was rooted in Christianity. It was rooted in patriotism. It was rooted in hope and optimism. And that's sort of things to celebrate, not to be afraid of.
It was rooted in the ideals of the country. On the night before, is be true to what you said on paper.
On paper.
Well, now he's talking about the Constitution.
Right.
He's talking about the Constitution. And the equality imperative at the center of our founding documents is the most important thing about our democracy, and we're running from it, not to it, these days.
And he said on paper, and he let that word hang. He let it sit there and looked at the audience, right?
Yep.
Never forget that. So again, where does the fight for social justice go today from here? Anybody want to take that one on?
I can offer a perspective on that. I lean on Dr. King's fourth and final book.
Where do we go?
Because I think that is the question, where do we go from here?
Chaos or community?
Subtitle, Chaos or Community. That question is exceedingly relevant today, all right? And I believe that we, what we need to be going for is we need to choose community because we are seeing an example of chaos all around us, all right? If you don't think this is chaos, I'm not sure what you're paying attention to. It never stops. That is running counter to community. So we need to reinvest in the notion of America, as he said, just be true to what you said on paper. On paper, that equality imperative needs to do a lot more work in our schools and our universities than it's doing. More of us need to invest in it. And I believe that's going to be the way out. And progress, the way we should define it, is not going back to an earlier time. We need to make America great for the first time, as great as the founding documents says she is. Not go back to try to recover a greatness that we never had. Amen.
Interesting. You're saying it's we, not one person, right? Not one organization. How does that materialize? What does that look like? Because we say that.
You know, I do think the other thing, and John, that's some beautiful insights from you. I think that to also re-examine what he meant by embracing nonviolence and embracing love. Because I don't think he thought of either of those as sort of wimpy kinds of responses. He thought of those as the most courageous. And that was something that Coretta was so insistent upon, that it was the nonviolence, and this is something you hear. So I think there's still a lot for us to explore, examine, and to interpret in the way he thought as we try to struggle with how we will live our lives. But I think the imperative and the challenge to all of us is not to look for this in someone else, but to look in the mirror and find it in yourself.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. I'm sorry, you want to?
Oh, no, I was just going to say very quickly. And I think we have to build bridges across communities, right? Not to allow ourselves to become siloed and to believe that it's only incumbent upon our tribe to fight the fights for our tribe. We have a common interest and a common enemy. We have to build bridges together.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, there's a lot of cynicism today. People feel like nonviolent protest is dead, that it means nothing anymore. But look around. Look at the protests that we've seen in Minneapolis. Look at the No Kings protests. These are protests full of love, full of humor, full of community building, and I think they are very much a legacy of Dr. King's work.
Last time I checked, reading the founding documents, we is spelled W-E, not W-E-E, all right? Too many people think it's W-E-E. It's a small group of people who we are, but it's W-E, and that's what we need to remember.
All right. Let's thank our panel, folks. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Amazing. Amazing.
Wow, awesome. What an amazing conversation, and what a great way to close out the week. To close out this afternoon session, we have a conversation about the scale of what's possible. 278 million learners. That's the number of people that Coursera has reached. And today, we're joined by Coursera co-founder and chairman, Andrew Ng, and Greg Hart, CEO of Coursera. They will be joined in conversation with Michael Moe, CEO and founder of GSV. Please welcome them to the stage.
All right. Look, this is, I think, a great way to finish our main stage presentations. We have the privilege to have the leading learning platform in the world, the founder, Andrew Ng, with us, as well as the CEO of Coursera, Greg Hart. Andrew, it's almost impossible for me to believe that Coursera is 15 years old. And I think Lucy combined you and Udemy already, because with the number of learners will be beyond the platform once the acquisition is done. But as of the last quarter, a couple hundred million on the platform. when you started Coursera, what was your kind of vision? Do you think you'd be at 200 million learners in 15 years? Or I mean, what's different than what you expected when you started the business?
I think when we started Coursera, frankly, I was so naive back then. I thought, how hard could it be? So part of me wonders, put this on the internet, surely there'll be billions of people that will use this. I think we're still on that journey to keep on working hard to serve learners every day.
So, and just to give people an update in the room, so obviously the merger was announced with Udemy. What's the status of that, and when do you expect that to come together? And then maybe just very, very quickly, why are you excited about the combination?
Sure. So we hope that it will come together very soon. We got shareholder approval from both Coursera and Udemy shareholders a little bit more than a week ago. Still going through the regulatory approval process, and so hopefully that will wrap up in the near future here. We're very excited to get on with it and really move forward. The things that excite me the most about the combination of Coursera and Udemy are both companies, were founded out of a passion for and a mission for education and the power to transform lives through access to education. And over the last year, the companies have both simultaneously and independently really focused on skill delivery as the next stage of evolution. 9 out of 10 learners who come to Coursera are coming to grow their careers, to advance their careers, and they want to do that by gaining skills that are relevant in the workforce. The combination of Coursera, which is a more consumer-focused platform, 2/3 of our revenue comes from our consumer business, and then Udemy, where 2/3 of their revenue comes from their enterprise business, really marries two strong brands with strong platforms and a shared mission, and gives us the capacity to invest at a faster pace in a better learning and skill delivery experiences. So that's what excites me the most about the bringing together the two companies.
So when you do a ChatGPT query and say, who's the top AI person in the world, the name that comes back is Andrew Ng, which is pretty cool. That is what we're. Thank you. So to have Andrew here, with all the things that AI is doing, it's pretty special. But Andrew, from your standpoint, how is AI? How do you think the integration, the collaboration between AI and education is going? And where are you seeing the ROI, or are you seeing an ROI?
It feels like the integration of AI and education is still in the very early phases. What has rapidly changed, as Greg was alluding, is the skills that all of us should be learning. And so companies like Coursera, DeepLearn.AI, Udemy have been shifting what we deliver to learners in terms of helping them build more relevant skills in this AI era. And then I feel like all of us have this instinct that we can accelerate the delivery of learning, or more importantly, accelerate how much individuals can learn. And I think that's been much tougher. One of the rate limiters for how fast people can learn is just the biology of the human brain, right? Our brains can only process so much information so quickly. And so there will be an acceleration. Coursera and others were delivering better learning experiences, but will the human brain ever learn 10 times faster than it does today? I don't know. But certainly what we have to teach people, that is rapidly changing, and I've been excited about. For example, I think everyone should learn to code. I feel like all job roles should embrace AI skills. I feel like every knowledge worker should be able to use AI to write code, to prompt, to have more effective workflows. So that delivery of new sets of skills is really important, and that's been moving quickly.
So, and Greg, you've now been with Coursera a little over a year. What is different than what you expected when you came in? And what were you most excited about right now?
Well, I think one difference that we're all feeling, so it's not just true for me in my role, is the pace of what is happening with AI and how it's transforming every potential job out there, and therefore what you need to know and the skills you need to develop. And that is, a huge opportunity for us at Coursera. You could argue also potentially, and the market perhaps perceives it as somewhat of a threat for us. I'm a huge believer in the opportunity that we have in front of us to rise to that challenge and help people adapt. I mentioned earlier that 9 out of 10 learners come to advance their career. There's a huge amount of focus on AI in doing that. We see one enrollment in an AI course on Coursera every 4 seconds, and that number keeps going up.
Say that again.
One enrollment every 4 seconds. Somewhere around the world, somebody is enrolling in a course on AI on Coursera every 4 seconds. Yeah, a year ago it was half that rate, and it's getting faster, not getting slower. For us, that creates a huge opportunity to make sure that at the same time that we're growing our offering of more and more courses that deliver AI learning, and also doing that not just for general intro learning courses, but also for more specialized courses. So we have, obviously we have courses from deep learning, from Andrew. We have courses from Anthropic, and those both include, general courses, but also, using Claude to code and more advanced courses. And so for us, we're very focused on how do we continue to evolve the learning experience as well, leveraging AI to deliver more effective outcomes for learners and more effective skill delivery that they can then demonstrate out in the workforce.
And you're kind of saying it, but are the LLMs a friend or are they a foe?
Yes. The way that I think about the LLMs, it's a very nuanced relationship. Obviously, we have relationships with all of them. We have courses from Anthropic on the platform I just mentioned. We have an integration with ChatGPT. We have an integration with Copilot. We also help OpenAI create content that's on our platform and also available via ChatGPT. So it's a very multifaceted relationship. Also, of course, aside from being a topic that people are learning about, it's also a technology we use to deliver that learning. And so my perspective is that it's actually a fantastic thing for Coursera and for the world that we now have access to a more facile source of knowledge than we used to. Having said that, there is no substitute, in my opinion, for human-centric learning from experts. And so obviously that was how Coursera was founded. It's how everybody in this room got their education. And I believe that in an era where it is easier than ever to create content with AI, the value of trusted content from either our university professors, whether it was Stanford or Yale or Michigan, Penn, et cetera, or from our industry partners, Google, Anthropic, Deep Learning, Microsoft, Meta, et cetera, has never been higher. And so I believe that it's up to us to demonstrate how we evolve that experience to take that human-centered learning and add AI to it to make it even more effective.
And so, and you look at, by the way, this is an issue, education overall, it's certainly been an issue overall for online learning. And Coursera, has created amazing access, but again, one of the things is how do you make sure that they complete the course and are able to use it to advance their lives. How is AI, what are you helping in creating better engagement and helping the student complete a course and keep on going?
So much to Coursera's credit, I think shortly after ChatGPT launched, long before I joined, Coursera introduced Coach, which is an AI tutor that rides alongside the learner in every course. So as the learner's going through a course, they can ask questions to refresh their memory on material that might have been covered earlier in the course. They can do role play. They can prep for an upcoming quiz or assessment in the course. Instructors can leverage Course Builder, another AI-driven course creation capability that Coursera introduced a number of years ago, to structure courses and insert AI-driven Socratic dialogue into the course so that the instructor can make sure that the course stays true to the rubric that they're working within and their pedagogical goals that they're trying to deliver on, but also enables a more one-to-one interaction, which before AI wouldn't have been possible in an online learning situation. So for us, we're constantly thinking about how do we improve the learning experience to make it more engaging and more effective, and AI is a fantastic tool to help us do that. And one of the things that we're increasingly experimenting with is outside of the course itself, how do you use AI to keep the learner engaged, to remind them about what they've accomplished so far, what lies ahead of them, bring them back, and keep them motivated?
So you both were at the HumanX conference in San Francisco, was it earlier this week or last week? I'm good, but they blurred. And we certainly have a theme here of this kind of collision between learning and earning and the workforce and education. Again, I think Coursera is positioned really terrifically to be part of this wave that's taking place. What did you learn there about workforce in adopting AI and how that's applied to jobs of the future and how that ultimately fits in with the Coursera vision.
So, one thing we chat a lot about HumanX is the question of ROI from AI. Over the last year, a lot of businesses have let 1,000 flowers bloom bottom-up innovation spread, and that's great. We should absolutely keep on doing that. But the ROI from a lot of this bottom-up innovation is just not there yet. And I have a strong point of view on why this is the case and the important role that training has to play in resolving this. It turns out that most bottom-up innovation results in point solutions. A business often does multiple things to create value. A lot of bottom-up innovation will have someone identify one step of a process and automate it and make it a little bit more efficient and save some money. But this gives you incremental efficiency gains, which is nice, but not transformative. The challenge I see when I speak with a lot of CEOs from Fortune 500, Fortune 50 is it takes a top-down motion, some of the broader scope, to look at all the steps to decide, with this step optimized, I'm going to redesign this whole workflow, and that drives business growth. Maybe one tiny example from EdTech is years ago, we started to roll auto grading, and if you swap out a human grader from a AI grader, that's nice. It saves a little bit of labor. We should absolutely do that. But the thing that is maybe more transformative is you can say, oh, with AI grading, I can now get back to the learner in 5 minutes rather than a week. That gives you more opportunities to change the learning experience. So I think we're still in the very early stages of educating across many businesses, entire teams to enable more bottom-up innovation, but then also delivering that executive level education so that bottom-up innovation or top-down innovation can meet, and someone can say, oh, if you can redesign this part of the workflow, let's change the way we do business to drive business growth. And I think this is one of the reasons why it feels like there's almost unlimited demand for learning these new AI tools, both from businesses and from individuals. And I think we're all eager to serve that to help drive that ROI from AI.
Anything to add?
Well, obviously we work with a lot of enterprise partners who are wrestling with this exact question. Like, how do we upskill and reskill our workforce that we're getting the benefit from AI? And I think what Andrew said is really accurate, that for a lot of companies, the possibility that AI represents has not yet been fully realized. We've seen a couple really interesting case studies with some of our enterprise partners where there's one, I can't name the company, but it's a large global professional services firm. So their entire business is helping other businesses adapt and evolve and go through transformations. And a big piece of that is change management. And so one of the things that we worked with them to do is to structure a set of learning programs that enabled more than 5,000 of their employees to take on very specialized AI-centric roles as they worked with their customers and their clients. And it's been incredibly effective for them because effectively it enables their company to then help all the other companies that are going through these transformations as well in a more effective way because they now have the AI skills. I 100% agree with Andrew's point on it can't just be bottoms up. Curiosity and doing that in an organic way is fantastic and absolutely should be part of the recipe, but you do need tops-down mandates as well to provide structure and organization, but also a strategic thesis around how you're going to use it. And you need the right level of leadership that has a holistic view of how all of the business works so that you can see some of the opportunities. You want to make sure that you're also doing that in a bottoms-up way because you're going to get lots of little opportunities that you wouldn't see, from the CEO seat, for example. But if you can get the best of both worlds, you can get something that can be really transformative over time.
So,
can I add one more thing to that?
Please.
So I think in terms of workforce transformation, if you look at all the professions out there, the one profession that AI is transforming the most, I think, is software engineering. So the acceleration in coding from, Cloud Code, OpenAI Codex, Gemini CLI, other tools is very real. And this is dramatically changing the training we need to deliver to software engineers as well. So my mental model is today we have many wonderful software building blocks, front-end, back-end, database tools, also AI tools, RAG, agentic workflows, guardrails, vector database, whatever. And software engineers need to learn many of these building blocks so that when there's an application product you want to build, that we know how to very quickly assemble them to create new software. And the workforce shifts in software engineering is very real. I see a lot of large businesses that frankly don't know how to do it. And if you're not seeing an AI native team operate, it is really unlike anything I have seen, say, 2 years ago, where today I will routinely assign a pod of, let's say, 2 or 3 engineers a task and ask them to deliver in 1 month, what I used to ask 10 engineers to deliver in 6 months. So if you've not seen this upfront, the acceleration is very real. And I think there's a lot of work to do to deliver that training, deliver that practice, to let many individuals and many businesses understand how to operate more like these AI native things. One weird thing, predicted year and a half ago, I think, that there'd be a product management bottleneck, where if the bottleneck is no longer writing the software, the bottleneck is deciding what to build, not the actual act of building. So I see, for example, a lot of software engineers that have a good user empathy, that know what to build, able to function much more effectively than a software engineer that expects a pixel-perfect Figma design and thinks their role in life is just implement what they're told. So I feel like software engineering is the jobs that's changed the most. I think this is a harbinger of what may happen to many other professions as well. And so that pressure to deliver training, to bring everyone along with us is very exciting, slightly stressful, but in a good way, type of pressure to be feeling.
A couple of related questions, but from what you see, and I know you think, oh, AI is changing everything and what the needs are, how does that change in terms of what we need to learn? And what are some of the key things that you see today, and if you kind of fast forward the clock, until the next, 5 years?
One trend that we're seeing that goes along with it, I mentioned that the rate of enrollment in AI courses, we're also seeing a massive increase in interest in what I would call soft skills, human skills, so critical thinking. So the rate of enrollment in critical thinking courses on Coursera has grown 184% year over year. So it's actually growing at an even faster rate than AI courses. It's not at the same volume, but it's growing at a faster rate. And I think it's because of a recognition that if the technical skills that I need to have keep changing incredibly rapidly, of course, I need to keep up with those, but also that means that the things that the AI is unlikely to be able to do, the things that are much more differentiated that humans uniquely can do, so critical thinking, communication, teamwork, leadership, empathy, those skills actually become even more important. And we're seeing that reflected in the enrollments in those types of things. And we see that both from our consumer learners, but also from enterprise as well.
What are you seeing in terms of the value of the degree versus just having this, being able to have the knowledge and be able to validate that I actually have these capabilities? I mean, are we seeing?
My perspective on this is, the reason that you went and got a degree to begin with was to gain a set of skills that would provide value to you in the workforce. And of course, they do a lot more than just that. They provide a more well-rounded set of skills that help you mature as a person, you get social benefits, et cetera. I think now what is really clear is that it used to be that you would get your degree and then you would go learn whatever you needed to learn on the job. But your formal learning had sort of, passed you by. Now I think you need to be a lifelong learner. And we're seeing that reflected on the consumer side of our business, but also on the enterprise side of our business, where we're really having companies say to us, like, we need to partner with you to make sure that ongoing skill development is just a part of what we do all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a business I think you guys could create just around all the data that you have around how people are learning, what they're learning. So what are some other interesting facts about the 200 million learners you have, the things you're seeing? So you talk about critical thinking growing faster than AI. What other type of observations or insights do you have?
One interesting observation is, I mentioned Coach earlier, our AI tutor that sits alongside the learner. We see higher levels of engagement with Coach from women and from first-time degree students. So their parents didn't go to college. And one of the reasons I think that is the case is that you don't have the same stigma in chatting with an AI tutor that you would potentially in a physical classroom, where you might be a little bit more reticent about raising your hand, speaking out, engaging with the teacher or with other students. And so AI can have a real leveling effect in terms of the playing field. And so that is a really interesting thing that we've seen in our learning data.
So, Andrew, you've been... Okay, please.
And I have a contrarian point of view that I'm going to state and may get me into trouble. In Silicon Valley, I know within many circles it's trendy to talk about the job apocalypse, this idea that there'll be massive unemployment, rioting the streets because many jobs, maybe not all, are going away. I suspect that the job apocalypse may not be nearly as bad as these trendy circles are saying. And in fact, recently, a couple months ago, there was a study from, I want to say, Citadel Capital that showed that software engineering job postings are actually up. Now, to be clear, there's a lot of job insecurity. Some of our teams talk to people at many levels. We see job insecurity not just among fresh college grads, but even to very senior leaders. And to be clear, I feel sympathy for anyone whose livelihood has been affected by layoffs. Many businesses overhired during the pandemic, during the era of zero interest rates or near zero interest rates. So there is overhang. Layoffs is tragic for the individuals and families affected, not dismissing any of that at all. At the same time, I feel like as people become more productive, a lot of our teams, we are just trying to hire more people, but the skills are shifting rapidly. And in terms of the skills I think people should learn, used to be controversial, maybe less controversial now. One of the most important skills of the future is knowing how to get a computer to do exactly being able to tell a computer exactly what you want, so do it for you. And for the foreseeable future, the language of computers is code. So what I'm already seeing in Silicon Valley as maybe a harbinger of what I think will happen elsewhere in the country and the world as well is the marketers that know how to code are outperforming the marketers that don't. My best recruiters, they don't read resumes by eye, they write code to help them screen resumes. One of my teams has an offsite later this week. My front desk receptionist codes, so she built a custom website just for our offsite. So I think because AI coding is so effective in the future, one of the skills out of many, including critical thinking and so on, is being able to use AI to write code, to build custom software. And I think if we do this, there's a potential for a flourishing of individual productivity. And I don't think people that navigate this well will face as bad a job apocalypse as is trendy to talk about in some circles.
So the last question for both of you, and I'm going to ask slightly different when I give you, Greg, your turn. But Andrew, you've been on the forefront of not just AI tech, innovation for your whole career, but really education innovation. And now you've got the 15 years at Coursera. If you look ahead over the next 10, 15 years, what do you think Coursera could look like? What do you hope it could be? And what do you think is possible?
I think the mission feels like we've made just a small dent in what Coursera should be setting out to do. I'm proud of the work that the company has done to transform lives through learning. At the same time, the world is going through a much bigger transformation than we've seen in recent memory. And so even more lives will be transformed one way or another. And by leaning in to help more people transform their lives through learning, I feel like there's still a lot of potential, still a lot of work ahead, more work ahead than we have done so far.
So Greg, sort of the same question, what do you think this could look like in, call it 10 years, or 10, 15 years? But also, how do you apply, you were obviously a senior executive at Amazon before you came to Coursera. What did you learn from Amazon, and how you plan that to having Coursera reach its potential?
Well, in terms of what Coursera can be over a 5 or 10 year period, and maybe applying some Amazon principles of think big and focus on the long term and focus on the customer and how you do that, we've got, I think, we've only scratched the surface of what we're capable of doing as a company and as an organization. So, we have 197 million registered learners. Udemy has another 80-odd million learners, so approaching 300 million learners. That is just scratching the surface of the current working age population out there, roughly 3.5 billion people across the world. There are another billion entering the workforce in the next 5 years, also another billion people coming online for the first time in the next 5 years. Sort of by definition, almost every one of those people who are coming online for the first time is perhaps ill-equipped for the modern workforce. They might be well-suited to exist in the same way that their family might have historically wherever they live, but if they want to really continue to advance, education is going to be a key part of that. And oftentimes online can unlock opportunities that they're not going to get in whatever their physical education setting is. And so I think that we have the opportunity to really transform how people learn and to know more about what's effective for learning at scale than any other company out there if we build the right things in a very customer-focused way and continue to innovate on their behalf.
You guys, I wish we had all afternoon to talk because there's so many things I would like to ask you, but this was fantastic. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
This was great. Please give them a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, Andrew. All right, well, that is a wrap on day 3 StageX lunch. Thank you to every speaker, every moderator, and all of you for being here. Please head next door for our Fusion Stage afternoon, where you will see a performance from none other than Afro Man, a conversation with Colin Kaepernick, Alan Houston, Dr. Maria Ortiz, and more. So hope to see you over there shortly. Thanks all.